and welcome to AGK's Vinyl Life. I'm your host, Anthony K. And on this week's episode, I'm going to be deep diving the catalog of Alice Cooper. That's right, Alice Cooper. I'm finally getting around to doing my Alice Cooper video, one that's been on my bucket list for quite a while. I've been trying to do deep dives of all my top 10 favorite artists of all time. So far, I've done Golden Earring. That was a collab with Naz Nomad, where we deep dived the entire Golden Earring catalog quite a while ago. I did a deep dive of Thin Lizzy, one of my favorite all-time bands, and I did a deep dive of Thin Lizzy and everything they had done and done post Thin Lizzy, as well as I just recently deep dived, of course, the Pet Shop Boys. And now it's time to do Alice. And I haven't done Alice mainly because, you know, people show Alice in the vinyl community. You see a lot of people showing Alice. But I thought it was about time that I threw my hat in the ring for Alice. And the main reason that finally prompted me to finally get this video done and deep dive Alice was because this Saturday night here in Toronto, I'm going to see Alice Cooper live in concert. And I'm really hyped for that because I've seen Alice many, many, many times over my lifetime. Many times. But this time I have a second row from the stage seat, center stage, second row. So I'm hyped. Alice is going to be right there in my face. And I'm looking forward to it after being in, pandemic for the last 2 years, getting out to a concert and enjoying a concert. And one of my favorite artists of all time, Alice Cooper. So super hyped for that. So that kind of prompted me to get this video finally done. And in this video, I'm going to show you guys Alice's entire studio output, all his studio albums. And I'm going to do this deep dive a little differently than past deep dives. I'm going to try not to spend too much time on each album. I'm going to basically show the album, maybe say one or two facts about it. And I'm planning to rank and rate the albums, which is something I've never done before. So I want to burn through these because he has a large studio output. Plus there's some live albums, and I have a couple other odds and ends here to show you guys. My Alice Cooper collection is well over 70 pieces. That includes LPs, CDs, 10-inch EPs, singles, box sets, DVDs, videotapes, Blu-rays, all that jazz. Well over 70 pieces. Alice is the artist I have the second most number of pieces in my collection from. Of course, I mentioned previously that Pet Shop Boys, I actually have the most pieces in my music collection of. But Alice runs second place with well over 70 pieces in my collection. But yeah, I got into Alice around the time of Killer, and I've been a fan ever since. And of course, people have heard me talk on this channel or in streams also know that I've mentioned many times that my first concert I ever went to in my lifetime at the wee age of 14 years old was indeed Alice Cooper. And I actually have the ticket stub here for you this time because I always mention it but never show the ticket stub. This is it, December 14th, 1973, Maple Leaf Gardens, Toronto, Canada, for a grand total of $5.50 for greens, which was medium quality seats. That was my first concert, the $1 Billion Babies Tour by Alice Cooper. What a way to start my concert going experience, my first concert experience. What a way to start my love of going to concerts. So there you go, ticket stub from $1 Billion Babies Tour. So let's get on with the albums. Like I said, I'm just going to show each album really quickly, and I'm going to rank and rate these albums, which is something I've never done before. But I'm not going to rank these albums like you see a lot of ranking videos where they count them down from 20 to 1 or 10 to whatever, how many albums that artist has. I'm only going to rank these so much as, are they in my top 10 or not? I'm basically only going to reveal what I would call my top 10 Alice Cooper albums. And they're going to be in no particular order. They're just going to be ranked as what I would recommend, what my personal top 10 of his studio albums are. That's as far as my ranking goes. I will rank the number 1 and I will rank the number 10, and there's actually a tie, three-way tie for number 10, so I guess I'm ranking top 12, but there's actually a three-way tie for number 10, but everything in between from 2 to 9 is just in no particular order. That's how I'm going to rank them, and I'm going to rate these albums in my own personal rating from 1 to 10 stars as far as what I think of the album, how good is the album, and that's something I've never done before. So I guess let's get on with it. We're going to get right into the first album. So Alice Cooper actually has 28 studio albums in his catalog. The first 7 of the albums were recorded as the Alice Cooper Band. Alice Cooper's real name, of course, being Vincent Fernier, son of a preacher, who then adopted the name Alice Cooper. But Alice Cooper was originally the name of the band, and Alice, of course, being the lead singer of the Alice Cooper Band. And the Alice Cooper Band, as they were, what a wonderful band. made 7 studio albums before they broke up and Ellis would solo. And he's worked with a number of great musicians and had a number of formulations of his band, but it's never really been the Alice Cooper band since those first 7 albums. It's been Alice Cooper solo with a great backing band. Though members of the original Alice Cooper band have returned over the years on various albums of his to do a song here or there. So even though the band broke up, they are still friendly and still do things together. And they have been involved on a number of Alice's later albums doing songs here and there. But the Alice Cooper band released 7 albums, and of course the debut album by Alice Cooper, by the Alice Cooper band, was Pretty's For You. This is a recent Rocktober Day reissue, or Rocktober reissue, a beautiful remaster and reissue. Pretty's For You, the first Alice Cooper album from 1969. This reissue is on a really nice red vinyl. And interesting factoid about this album, if I was to say anything, is that this album was really a psych album. When Alice first started, this album was really much a psych album. And I really hated this album when it first came out when I was young. You know, when I discovered Killer, I bought his back catalog and heard this thing and go, oh, what the hell is this mess? Because I wasn't into psych yet when I grew to love psych at a very later age. And when I look back at this album now, this album is a really, really great psych album. And I really have grown to love this album. And an interesting factoid about this is if you notice the cover here, this painting on the cover, the girl is lifting her skirt up, showing her panties. Well, back in the day here in Canada, I don't know about the US, but certainly in Canada, that was a no-no. And this cover was actually censored, and there was a yellow sticker placed right here on the old Canadian issues. There was a yellow sticker stuck over this spot. It was just a yellow dot stuck over there, blocking the panties, even though it's just a drawing. That's how censors were back in the day. So they actually censored this cover. But I really like this album. It's really grown on me. A great spin. I definitely wouldn't rank this one in my top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. It's an acquired taste, this album, and I'm going to give this album a strong, I'm going to give this album a strong 6.5 out of 10 for this album. Next up in 1970 would be Alice Cooper Band's second album, Easy Action, which I've shown recently on my channel. I just recently obtained this copy of Easy Action on the Green Warner label. Easy Action would be their second outing. It would follow similar to the first album, a little bit of psych on it, but it was starting to transition to the Alice Cooper Band that we know. It certainly had some melodies on. There was a couple songs on here that actually would be reworked on to later albums. And this is a great spin too. This really is a great spin. And I really like this album a lot. It's another one that will grow on you, but it was definitely the transition from that psych sound that they did on their first album to the sound that would appear on their next album, which was really where the band kicked off, being Love It to Death. But Easy Action, another really good spin. There was a couple of really great tracks on here I loved. But I would not rank this in the top 10. I would maybe give this a ranking of probably a 6.5 or closer to a 7 if I were to rank this album. Number 3 in his library came out, of course, in 1971. It was the album that would really, really push Alice and really start to give him fame. It had Alice's first big charting single in I'm 18, which was a massive single, and it's been a concert staple in his concerts from day one to this day. I'm 18 is a classic Alice Cooper track, probably, you know, up there with School's Out, $1 Billion Babies, and some of the others, but certainly I'm 18 was an anthem, and it was one of the songs that I definitely loved when I was a young lad. And I remember when I turned 18, the first thing I played when I turned 18 was, of course, I'm 18. And this is another recent Rocktober pressing of and reissue of the Love It to Death album with the original cover, another cover that had a band on it because of good old Alice Cooper's thumb sticking out of the fly here, and people mistook it for something else, and that was airbrushed out. But this is a recreation of the original cover of Love It to Death with the classic Ballad of Dwight Fry on here, and I'm 18. This album is an absolute, for me, this album is a 10 out of 10. I'm going to say it now. This album is a 10 out of 10. There's not a track that's not great on this album. This album is a 10 out of 10, and this would be one of the first albums I would rank in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. 1971's Love It to Death. Next up, the fourth album from the Alice Cooper Band, which was dropped in 1972, and it was the first album, full album, that I bought by Alice Cooper before I went backwards and got his previous albums. And it was, of course, like I said, Killer by Alice Cooper. Another legendary album, absolutely legendary album by Alice Cooper. And this particular album, when it first came out, came with a calendar. And I have the original calendar still attached to this album. And as you can see, it's a 1972 calendar, a horrific calendar. And, you know, causing controversy once again. Alice Cooper was very controversial back in this time period. And, of course, this calendar was pretty horrific. I remember my parents hated this calendar. But Alice Cooper's Killer. This I would also rank in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. And the big songs from here, of course, Halo of Flies, Under My Wheels, Be My Lover. I mean, Under My Wheels and Be My Lover were singles, with Desperado as a flip side. Dead Babies, Killer. This album is a killer. An absolutely fantastic album. I'm ranking this one in the top 10 of all time, and I'm also giving this one a 10 out of 10. Just an absolute masterpiece. Next up, the second album Alice Cooper Band would drop in 1972. They dropped two albums in 1972, Killer, and this one here, School's Out. And what an absolutely great album. The Alice Cooper Band could not go wrong. Of course, School's Out, probably the most famous Alice Cooper song ever recorded. A concert staple. You hear this song in movies, in TV shows. It's just an absolute staple. And of course, this is the recent Friday Music remaster and reissue of, and this is a limited edition version of that reissue, which had the original school desk, because that's how the original album was released. It was supposed to be a school desk in high school, and of course, the album wrapped in a pair of panties. And this particular edition comes with a bunch of bonus material as well, a report card and some collector cards and things. But School's Out, a brilliant concept with a die-cut sleeve that you could fold into a school desk, and an absolutely spectacular album. I would rate this one a 9 out of 10. Not quite, I don't think, as good as Love It to Death or Killer, but still a fabulous album. I'd rate it a 9 out of 10, but I wouldn't put this one in the top 10 ranked albums in Alice Cooper's library. It had some really great ideas on it. It kind of did a play on West Side Story with Gutter Cat versus the Jets. It was a hodgepodge of things, but an interesting album nonetheless. But I wouldn't rank it in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time, though it would be very high up. School's Out, 1972. Next up is 1973, and of course the masterpiece of Alice Cooper albums, of the Alice Cooper Band's albums. An absolute masterpiece. This is a very rare Rocktober pressing of Billion Dollar Babies. One of a very, very valuable album now in Discogs. And this is Billion Dollar Babies, and I would rank this album the best Alice Cooper album of all time. This is Alice Cooper's Dark Side of the Moon. This is Alice Cooper's Abbey Road. This is Alice Cooper's Rumors. This album is a must-have, I think, in any music collection. If you're only going to ever have one Alice Cooper album, Billion Dollar Babies is the album to have. And this is a faithful recreation of the original Alice Cooper. This is, of course, a Rocktober edition, beautifully mastered, with all the original inner stuff in here. It's got the original inner liner, the $1 million bill. I'm not going to pull it out, though. The $1 billion bill, the collector cards. It's like a wallet with an embossed logo on it. Billion Dollar Baby, such brilliant packaging. And this particular pressing is on this gorgeous, I've shown it before, is on this gorgeous snakeskin wallet green vinyl, and sounds gorgeous. Billion Dollar Babies, I rank this one as the #1 Alice Cooper album in his entire catalog, a must-have, and absolutely a 10 out of 10 album. Hands down a 10 out of 10 album. And of course, it was just from beginning to end, it was just spectacular. You know, No More Mr. Nice Guy, $1 billion Babies, Elected, Raped and Freezing, Hello Hooray, I Love the Dead. You know, it just Generation Landslide, Unfinished Suite. It's just a masterpiece, an absolute masterpiece. Next up, also 1973, would be the band as they were's last album before they broke up and Alice went solo. This would be the last album that the band released in later in 1973. Once again, releasing 2 albums in 1973 as they had done the previous year. And it was, of course, Muscle of Love, a very, very, very underrated album, which originally came, this is an original First Canadian Press, came in this silly cardboard box. Once again, Alice Cooper's doing crazy, crazy packaging. We won't talk about what these stains were supposed to represent. Let's just say they were supposed to represent stains of a male bodily fluid. That was the idea of this, as the whole concept of this album, Muscle of Love. Guess what the Muscle of Love is? And even the inner liner was a photo of them going into a nude wrestling parlor, and then coming out all beaten up and beaten to hell. And it included a book cover that used to be able to wrap around your notebook in high school, which I never did. This is as you can see, this is still in one piece. It's a notebook cover protector. And then, of course, the album was just inside. But this is a very, very underrated album. I love this album. I absolutely love this album. It had on it, one song on this album was Man with the Golden Gun with Liza Minnelli that was originally recorded for the title track of the James Bond film, Man with the Golden Gun, and they never used it. They discarded it and went with Lulu's version of Man with the Golden Gun. But a great song on it. This album is fantastic. Muscle of Love, Teenage Lament 74, Woman Machine. This is a fantastic album, highly underrated, and I would rank this album also in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. So far we've had 4 albums that I would put in the top 10 of all time. Love It to Death, Killer, $1 Billion Babies, and Muscle of Love, all I would rank in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. And I would rank this album a solid 9.5 out of 10. Next up would be 1975. In 1974, Alice, of course, the band had broken up and Alice was regrouping himself. But in 1974, he did drop a greatest hits album, which I will show you in a little bit later. A very good greatest hits album. But in 1975, Alice would return solo with a whole new band that would be with him for a few albums. And Bob Ezrin, of course, producing. And he would release another masterpiece. And this one I would rank as the 5th top 10 album in the entire Alice Cooper catalog. This would be my 5th choice. Or not in 5th place, but number 5 of 10 of the greatest albums Alice Cooper ever released. And I'm talking about Welcome to My Nightmare. That's right, Welcome to My Nightmare. And there's something special, as you can see, about this particular package here, because it includes in it a press kit. And I'll tell you the story behind that for those that don't know it. This is my original first Canadian press, given to me by Alice Cooper's management themselves, which of course came with this press kit here. And this was given to me at the Welcome to My Nightmare show, this particular set here. I do have another copy of Welcome to My Nightmare because I had owned Welcome to My Nightmare before I went to see the show. But I decided to show you guys the one that was given to me. So I actually have 2 Welcome to My Nightmares, the one I bought and this one which was given to me by Alice himself and his management. And I was given, and the long story short, but Anthony, how'd you get that, is because my next door neighbor when I was a teenager was Alice Cooper's lawyer here in Canada. He was my next door neighbor. I used to babysit his kids. And so he got me a backstage visit to the Welcome to My Nightmare tour show, where I met Alice and was given these things. And as you can see, to Anthony from Alice, 1975, is written right on here from Alice Cooper, autographed. And this is a press kit that radio stations were given. And of course it included the tour program, some beautiful 8x10 glossies, which still look like they're brand new. Some beautiful 8x10 glossies, some production notes from Atlantic Records, a letter from Atlantic Records, and then production notes on all the members of the band, including Alice. This beautiful press kit was given to me along with this album, and what a spectacular show the Welcome to My Nightmare tour was. Probably Alice Cooper's best tour that he ever did. It was such a theatrical experience. Welcome to My Nightmare, and there's the concert ticket that I went May 2nd, 1976 or 75. May 2nd, 75, I think, or 76. 75. May 2nd, gold floors right up front for Alice Cooper's. Not as good as I have here. This was the 16th row, so a little farther back from the stage than my ticket for this Saturday night. But Alice Cooper, welcome to my nightmare. And I would rank this, like I said, in the top 10 of his library, and this is definitely a 10 out of 10 album. 10 out of 10. Moving along now. After, of course, Welcome to My Nightmare dropped, Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, kind of a follow-up concept album to Welcome to My Nightmare. Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, where, you know, he pays the price for doing all these violent crimes on stage and all the things he did as a bad boy for the previous year. So the whole idea of this album is that Alice Cooper goes to hell and he meets the devil. The whole thing is basically kind of a continuation of Welcome to My Nightmare. He wants to wake up from this hell that he's in, and it's a great spin. This is a recent reissue on, I believe it's a orange vinyl. Yeah, it's on an orange vinyl, a recent remaster reissue. It does have the original a copy of the original inner liner on it. But Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, not as good as Welcome to My Nightmare, but it did spawn a big single in I Never Cry. Of course, Welcome to My Nightmare had Only Women Bleed, which was a huge, huge, huge hit for Alice. So the next few albums, he would do a few ballads on them, because he was kind of getting into the poppy ballads. The Only Women Bleed was a huge success, the way he did I Never Cry, another big single. I would rate this album an 8 out of 10, but I would not put it in the top 10 albums of all time. Next up would come 1977, and this is an unusual album. This is when he was starting to feel the effects of a little bit too much drinking. He was drinking very heavily. This album was inspired by old film noir and gangster films of the 40s and 50s. Hence the Revolve, the Saturday Night Special, and the Booze and so on. It was Lace and Whiskey from 1977, kind of the last album that current band would do together, that he'd put together for Welcome to My Nightmare. That bunch of musicians. This is an original U.S. first pressing. I like this album a lot. It's a great spin. Very different, more of a hard rockin' album. But it, like I said, the kind of the theme of this album was around 1940s and 50s and gangsters and private detectives with things like Lace and Whiskey and oh my God, You Bangy Stomp. But he had, of course, again another lullaby on here, which was not lullaby, another kind of easygoing pop hit, which was You and Me, another kind of romantic song. But this has got some great tunes on it. I liked It's Hot Tonight and Road Rats. But a different album for him, not as good as previous albums. I would rate this album a 7.5 out of 10, and I would not put it in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. Then after Lace and Whiskey, Alice would check himself into a program to try to quit his drinking at a mental institution, an asylum. He would check himself in for a few months at an asylum to try to curb his drinking habit. And while he was in there, he came up with an idea for his next album, which would drop in 1979, and it was called From the Inside. And From the Inside was co-written with Alice and Bernie Taupin from Elton John fame. Bernie Taupin and Alice would write this album, and all of the songs on this album were about his experiences in the asylum, and they were actually songs that were based on characters that he met in the asylum. in the mental institution. So all these songs were actually based on real people that he met in the asylum. And this is a German pressing, a really beautiful German pressing. And if I can get it out of here for you, I will show you what the concept of the cover was. Another brilliant cover concept is as it was like this, and you open the doors. You open the doors, and there were all the people in the asylum right there. And there was even a little door here, the quiet room, where Alice would sit. And that's actually on the inner liner. The original inner liner is behind there. And that's actually a picture from the inner liner. And if you flip it over, you can actually have two different pictures here. But that's Alice in the Quiet Room, one of the songs in the album. And this is all the characters at the asylum. And even the back doors of this asylum opened, and you would see Alice checking out. You would see Alice checking out of the asylum. And that's the inner liner again. From the Inside, co-written by Bernie Taupin. And it, of course, also had a kind of a ballady song that was a big single here, is How You Gonna See Me Now. A wonderful spin. I would not rank it in the top, once again, in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time, but I would give this one a strong 8.5 out of 10. And I'm just rating these as I go. I have not pre-rated these. These are like, I'm rating these things as I'm showing them to you guys. So these are just top of my head, gut reaction ratings for these albums. So that's, I thought about it before I made this video. Would I rank everything and write it all down? And I said, you know what, I'm going to rate them on the fly. Though I did rank my 10, top 10, top 12 albums. I did pre-rank them in my head. But ratings I'm doing on the fly. So that was 1979. And of course, 1980, punk and new wave was becoming the norm. Rock was kind of dying out. It was not the center stage. Punk and new wave was taken off. It was 1980. It was a new generation. It was new fashion. Hence, the next album being called Flush the Fashion, and it was his 1980 effort. This is an original first Canadian press. Flush the Fashion, Alice Cooper 80. It was his stab at a new wave, punky new wave album. Very short and sweet songs. Very punk and new wave influence. And it's a great spin. It really is a great spin. My favorite tracks on here were, of course, Clones. Clones was the big single that was on the radio here. Clones and Dance Yourself to Death were the two big songs here. I would give this album a solid 7.5 out of 10. And I would not put it in the top 10 albums of Alice Cooper's career, but a solid 7.5. Something completely different from Alice Cooper's 80s Flush the Fashion. And this was when Alice started to go downhill again. He got heavily into drugs and cocaine. He got into drugs. The rehab that he had done a couple of years before that hadn't taken hold, and he would really start to get heavily under the influence. And his next couple albums, he admits he doesn't really remember a whole lot about the tour that accompanied them. He doesn't recall a lot about making the albums. It was a very unusual time in Alice Cooper's life, one that he managed to overcome and kick the drugs and kick the drinking. But the next couple albums would be kind of the lowest point, I think, in Alice Cooper's career as far as music quality goes. So Flush the Fashion, 1980, and then of course in 1981, and this is a Rocktober edition of Special Forces, which I actually liked better than Flush the Fashion. Special Forces, and I remember going to see the Special Forces tour, and Alice just looked weird. He just looked strange. He changed his whole look, short hair and just weird makeup, and his whole band were like in commando uniforms. It was a really unusual concert. Special Forces, this is our October Day pressing, and I think this one's on, I can't remember, is this on a clear or it's on a blue? It's on a blue vinyl. Special Forces, but this had a couple of great songs on it for sure. A couple of really great songs on it. Who Do You Think We Are was fantastic. He did a version of 7 and 7 Is on here, as well as a live reversion of Generation Landslide, which was, of course, on Billion Dollar Babies. But a really unusual album and a short album. Special Forces, definitely not in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. So far, we've only had 5 that I've shown you. And this one I'd rate only a 7, and that's 6.5 to 7. Probably I'm being generous when I give it a 7, maybe a 6.5 to 7. Just slightly not as good as I don't think of as Flush the Fashion, just because this album was a real hodgepodge. Almost felt like a bunch of leftovers. You know, it was a real hodgepodge of varieties of styles in here. Also following that Flush, there was some punky stuff on here, new wavy stuff, some rock stuff. It was just a hodgepodge, but yeah, it was okay. It was okay. Next up is the only album I don't have on vinyl in his entire catalog. I used to back in the day. I've been watching for a copy. They pop up every now and then, and I haven't rushed to get to this album because it is the worst album is in his entire catalog, hands down. If anybody out there wants to VCLT me a copy of this album, I would be happy to accept it. I keep watching for it. I know I can buy a new remaster of it, but they're pricey, and honestly, the album's not worth spending 50 or 60 bucks for a remastered pressing of this album. I will watch for a used version. They occasionally pop up. I missed one. I remember going to my local record store and seeing one, and that day I didn't buy it, and like a dummy. I don't see it now. But if anybody's going out there, they want to shoot my way, I'd be happy to get it. It is the only album I don't have on vinyl in the entire Alice Cooper catalog, though I do have it on CD, and it is Zipper Catches Skin. And this is just a mess. This really was just an absolute mess. Zipper Catches Skin. I think the only great song on here was Zorro's Ascent and Tag You're It. Alice doesn't even remember recording this album. It's just a weird album, and definitely won't be ranked in my top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. In fact, I would rate this album, and I'm being generous, would rate this album a 4 out of 10. And that's being generous. Zipper Catches Skin from 1982. And then from 1983 would be his next album, which is an underrated album, I think. This one's an underrated album. Ellis definitely bounced back on this album over his previous 2 albums. This one is definitely a bounce back from the original, from the last 2 albums. And it's an underrated album, and it's called Da Da. It's a concept album. I believe, if I remember, it was about a serial killer. It's a concept album. This is an original Canadian first pressing of the album, Da Da, which had the lyrics and everything right on the back. We were kind of crazy how he did that one. No real inner liner, just a plastic inner liner. Da Da. And this is an underrated album. It had an interesting lineup. I mean, really great musicians on this album. This one's really overlooked and underrated. I'm gonna give this one a strong 7.5, maybe even 8 out of 10. I really like this album. It was kind of a return to form for Ellis after the last couple albums, but definitely not another one not in the top 10 albums of all time. 1983's Da Da. Next up, we're into 1985 now, and this would be kind of Ellis's big return. This would be Ellis's kind of big return. He'd gotten himself all back together again, thinking clearly, got New Life Blood, put a new band together, which featured, like, Kip Winger was in his band, for one thing. He put a really great kind of hair metal band together. He did the Nightmare Returns tour, which I went to see in Hamilton, Ontario. It was a killer tour. And the next 2 albums he would make with this band with Kip Winger, and they were great albums. A completely different style, definitely hair metal influenced. And the first one was, of course, 1985's Constrictor. That's right, 1985's Constrictor. And this is a great spin. The recording process, definitely a different style of recording on these. These albums are very metal sounding, very, very tinny, hair metal-y kind of sounding albums. But definitely Alice Cooper was returning to form with this album, Constrictor, which featured, of course, Teenage Frankenstein. What a great song. And He's Back, the man behind the mask, which was the theme song to a Friday the 13th, hence the hat. I think it was Friday the 13th Part 3, the 3D movie. I think it was Friday the 13th Part 3. I'd have to look at my Friday the 13th movies. But yeah, He's Back, the man behind the mask was the theme song for a Friday the 13th movie. Who better to do a theme song for a Jason film than Alice Cooper? Great spin. And what a cover, huh? This is one, I do love this cover. This is such a great cover, Alice Cooper cover. Constrictor. And that one I would rate a solid 8.5 out of 10. 8 or 8.5 out of 10. But not again, once again, not in the top 10 albums in his studio library. That would be followed up in 1987, I believe this was, 1987. Yeah, 2 years later, he would follow that album up with this album here, Raise Your Fist and Yell. That's right, Raise Your Fist and Yell, and this is a gold stamp promo copy of the album, a gold stamp promo copy. And this one basically followed the same formula, same band as Constrictor. And of course, this Alice Cooper lettering that first popped up on Constrictor here would of course become Alice Cooper's logo that would be used on a lot of albums, and it's even on this shirt here, which is from Detroit Story, last year's album, Detroit Stories. But Raise Your Fist and Yell would be the follow-up to Constrictor. Another great spin, had some great songs on it. Prince of Darkness, which was, I think, used in the theme of the Prince of Darkness movie, if I remember right. But a really great spin. Raise Your Fist and Yell. I would give this one a solid 8 out of 10. 7.5 to 8 out of 10, but not in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. Next up came 1989, and this was Alice Cooper's big, real big. Alice Cooper blew up in this with this. This was a definite blow up for Alice. It was Trash. This was an Alice Cooper took off the makeup. That's right, and he did the Trash tour, where the first half of the tour he wore no makeup on stage and basically rocked out, and then in the second half of the show he would then put on the makeup. He'd put the makeup right on the show. So he decided to go sans makeup, like a lot of Kiss had done their Unmasked. So he was doing the sans makeup, no more makeup, for this album Trash, which had a lot of great musicians on here. It was produced by Desmond Child, absolutely brilliant producer. Produced this. Desmond Child produced this. It featured John Bon Jovi on one song, Slash on guitar. This was a real all-star album. He'd moved to Epic Records at this point. This was on Epic Records. This is a very recent Friday Music remaster and reissue, worth a pretty penny on a beautiful red vinyl. This album, absolutely killer. I'm going to give this one a 10 out of 10, and this would be the sixth album that I would put I would put in his 10 greatest albums of all time. This would definitely be one. This would be the sixth one I would add to that pile of great albums. Alice Cooper's Trash. Poison was a massive, massive single. Spark in the Dark, House of Fire, and of course another ballad, Only My Heart Talkin'. This Maniac's in Love with You. Of course, Trash featuring John Bon Jovi on vocals. This is a 10 out of 10 spin, and definitely in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. 1989's Trash. He would follow that one up in 1981 with this masterpiece, and this is another masterpiece in my opinion, an absolutely killer album. Hey Stupid. That's right, Hey Stupid, Alice Cooper, absolutely killer album. This is a music on vinyl reissue. Fabulous songs. Hey Stupid, Love's a Loaded Gun. What a killer song that was. Dangerous Tonight, might as well be unmarred. Feed My Frankenstein, which he still does in concerts to this day. Feed My Frankenstein, Hurricane Years, Little by Little. This is a killer album. I'm going to rate this one a 10 out of 10 as well, and also put it in the top 10 albums Alice Cooper's ever done. This would be my 7th addition to that list of great albums. Definitely in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. Hey Stupid from 1981. Then continuing on from 1994, this is also a Friday Music remaster reissue, and this was called Alice Cooper, The Last Temptation. Last Temptation, again following the same kind of band and members that he'd done on the previous two albums. The Last Temptation was a concept album by Alice, and this is a Friday Music remaster reissue, like I said, on a blue vinyl. But this one wasn't as good, definitely not as good as Trash or Hey Stupid. It was a concept album, but it did have a couple of great songs on it. Lost in America was really, really, really great song on this album. And It's Me, another great track on this album. And this one was produced by Andy Wallace. 1994's outing from Alice Cooper, before he would take a huge hiatus and pretty much kind of semi-retire for a while. And he would take a big hiatus from recording albums for a number of years. And I would only rank this one maybe a 7 out of 10, a 7 to a 7.5 out of 10 in his library. And would not put it in the top 10 great Alice Cooper albums of all time. Then it would be quite a few years later, from 1994, we would jump ahead to 1999, or 2000, sorry. You would jump ahead to 2000. Alice Cooper at that point would not do any more studio stuff. He kind of semi-retired for a long time. But he would return 6 years later in 2000 for Brutal Planet. And this is a recent Quality Records remaster, reissue, limited numbered edition. Beautiful, beautiful pressing and sounding album. Brutal Planet by Alice Cooper from 2000, and where he once again decided to reinvent himself. And this is a really great spin. It's a hard rockin' spin. He decided to go full on metal at this point. This is pretty much a metal album. This had Brutal Planet, which he plays in concerts to this day. Wicked Young Man. Pick Up the Bones. It's the Little Things. This was a kind of a metal outing for Alice, a new sound for him. It didn't chart well, it didn't do well for him, but a lot of Alice Cooper fans will say this is a great album, and this would be definitely one that I'd put in of 3 or 4 albums that it's really tough. This is probably the high. Would rank very high, but it would not quite make it into the top 10 for me. I don't think it would not make it into the top 10 for me. But it was a great spin, an interesting album. I'm going to rate this one a 7.5 to 8 out of 10. I would not put it in the top 10 albums, but it would probably be very, 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 very high on the list, but not in the top 10. Brutal Planet from 2000. And he would follow Brutal Planet up in 2001 with Dragontown, another metal album. Basically the same. He was using the same formula on this record that he used on Brutal Planet, but it did not do well, but it's pretty much a metal album. But an interesting spin. This is the recent Record Store Day reissue on double 45 RPM wax, which was done on a beautiful orange vinyl. It's a double 45 RPM pressing. Dragontown, not a great album. One of his least lesser albums in his library, let's just say. But interesting. It had a couple great songs on it. My favorite song on this, for sure, was Trigger Man. That's a killer track. Trigger Man, but definitely not as good as previous things he had done. But a great album just the same. Not one I would put in the top 10, but I would rate this album probably about a 6 out of 10. 6.5 being generous. 6 out of 10. Maybe even a 5.5. Not a great album, but not bad. Dragontown. Somewhere from 5.5 to 6.5. I'd rate that album. After Dragontown, Alice would return again, and this time in 2003, if I remember right. 2003, he would return with The Eyes of Alice Cooper. And this album, the one thing about this album is it would be starting to be the formulation of his newest band. And the band that's been with Alice, most of the members of the band that Alice currently tours with and makes albums with, started back in this day and have been with him for a number of years. A lot of great artists on this album, musicians on this album. And this was more of a return to rock, but it's kind of a disjointed album, but there are some great songs on it, such as Detroit City, which would be re-recorded on his latest album. The Eyes of Alice Cooper, an interesting rock album that it was kind of all over the place, but not a bad spin. But I'm only going to rank this one maybe a 6. And being generous, I'm going to also rate this one maybe a 6.5 at the most out of 10, and definitely not in the top 10 albums of all time. We have there's a few more yet to come. But 2003's The Eyes of Alice Cooper, which actually had 4 different album covers. They were all the same, but the actual eyes on the covers were different colors. There was green. I think there was the red, which I have. I think there was a blue, a green, and a purple, if I remember right. But 4 different album covers with 4 different colors of the eyes of Alice Cooper. But not a bad album, but not great. Next up is one of 3 albums. The next 3 albums, actually, all in a row. The next 3 albums are ones I would I would put tied for 10th place. So remember, in the beginning of this video, I said there were albums that I would put in. There was one that I would definitely put first, and there were 3 that would be in 10th place. This and the next 3 albums are all, in my opinion, tied for 10th place in the top 10 albums of all time. This is 2005, if I remember right. 2005's Dirty Diamonds. And this was a return. The styling of this album was a return to the Alice Cooper band of old. He really tried to make this sound like the original Alice Cooper band sound, though it didn't contain members of the original Alice Cooper album. He did want it to sound like classic Alice Cooper band music. He really tried to bring that sound of the Love It to Death era back into this album. And this is a great spin. And like I said, that's why I would put it in a tie for 10th place in the top 10 albums of Alice Cooper's library. This was a really, really great album. And this is the very, very rare record store day pressing that came on a black, on a splatter vinyl. And I'm having trouble getting out, so I won't try to get it out. But it came on a blood splatter vinyl. There were only 900 of these pressed. I'm happy to have gotten one. But this was a great spin. Women of Mass Distraction, Dirty Diamonds, Sunset Babies, this Run with the Devil. This is just a kill. Zombie Dance. This is a great album. Dirty Diamonds, Alice Cooper, from 2005 or 2007. I can't remember the date on that. I didn't see it there, but somewhere in there. Next up is, like I said, another one that I would tie in 10th place of the great albums of all time. And this is another very, very rare pressing. The CD of this album had a completely different cover. Only the vinyl had this cover. And this is on a very cool, kind of glowy, kind of cloudy colored vinyl. And this is actually the original. This is the cover of the album. And of course, I'm talking about Along Came a Spider. And this is the cover that you got on the CDs of the album. Along Came a Spider. But this limited edition vinyl pressing had a completely different cover. Along Came a Spider by Alice Cooper. And this one's another great album. Back in the creepy era of Alice Cooper albums. A really fantastic album. I love this thing. Along Came a Spider. Highly recommend it. I would rate this one a very strong 8.5 out of 10. And like I said, it would tied for 10th place in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. And the last one that's tied for the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time is 2012, I believe this one, 2011's Alice Cooper, Welcome to My Nightmare. This was a sequel to Welcome to My Nightmare that he decided to do. This is a very rare 2 LP pressing of that album, Welcome to My Nightmare, where he revisited Steven, the character of his Welcome to My Nightmare album, went back into a nightmare and did a whole whack of new songs, and a couple songs on this album were performed by the original Alice Cooper band. But there are some great songs on here, and even Kesha, who was a big singer at the time, was featured on one of the songs on this album. But this had a great single in I'll Bite Your Face Off. This was a Disco Bloodbath was great. It's a good album. It's a really good album. I Am Made of You. What a great album. So I would put this as the third album tied in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. 2011's Welcome to My Nightmare. And then the last 2 albums here are also in the top 10. These ones are in my top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time, hands down. And the next one is, of course, 2017's masterpiece. And I think this is a masterpiece. Paranormal from 2017. I think this one is absolutely brilliant. This is a 2 LP set. Paranormal, Alice Cooper. I love this album. The big song, of course, Paranormal is a big song on here. Paranoid Personality is fantastic. And the original Alice Cooper band would perform a couple of songs on this album as well. Alice Cooper's Paranormal from 2017. I would rate this a strong, very strong 9 out of 10, maybe 9.5 out of 10, and put it in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums of all time. Of course, produced by Bob Ezrin. Love this album. And last but not least, in his catalog, his 28th studio album, which dropped last year, which I raved about last year, did an unboxing, talked a lot about, so I'm not going to get into great detail. It is Detroit Stories, Alice Cooper's departure from his shock rock and just doing straight up Detroit rock with a lot of very famous musicians. Check out my my in-depth look at this album from about a year ago, the video I did, which was an in-depth look at this album. So I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I would definitely put it in the top 10 Alice Cooper albums ever recorded, and this is a 10 out of 10. Absolutely hand down. Detroit Stories, Alice Cooper. And that's his entire studio catalog to date. But, you know, he's never done. And, of course, he does do other projects as well. Here's something he did during lockdown. This is before he did Detroit Stories. He released this during the pandemic. Don't Give Up. This is an autographed picture disc. Don't Give Up, which was a quarantine song that he had done. And he'd also done, before that, he had done this EP here called Breadcrumbs, which inspired the Detroit Stories album. This is Breadcrumbs, which was a small, I think it was a 5-track CD, 5-track album, 5 or 7, 7-track EP. And most of the songs from this EP, 3/4 of the songs from this EP would appear on Detroit Stories, but completely new versions. So don't worry if you're buying, if you're buying this and buying this, it's completely reworked songs. So different versions of the songs, but this album inspired this Detroit Stories album. Breadcrumbs EP, just to throw a few things out there. Of course, he's involved in so many things. And of course, as I talked about earlier, for somebody else, if you don't get $1 Billion Babies and you want to check out Alice Cooper's catalog, certainly his original Greatest Hits album, which came out after Muscle of Love, has all the best things from Love It to Death, Killer, School's Out, $1 Billion Babies, and Muscle of Love. All the big singles are on this. This is a classic Greatest Hits album. I'd say this is definitely a Greatest Hits album that everybody should have for sure. So something else there. And I'll quickly show you some of his live albums to finish off the video here. I'm going to show you some live albums here. And I'm not going to rank these. I will, or rate them. I'm just going to quickly show them to you because I kind of really just wanted to leave the ranking and ratings for the studio albums. But here's my collection. Here's a collection of live albums. Of course, this is the Record Store Day recording of the $1 Billion Baby Tours live in Texas. This is a single LP with a 7-inch single included, taken from that classic tour that I was on. And this is Houston, Texas in April '73. I saw him in December '73. So $1 Billion Babies, the concert. And this has really great sound. It's a great spin if you can find it from one of his greatest tours ever. This one here, which is Welcome to My Nightmare, live in '75. This is an unofficial LP. It sounds really good. I suspect this was ripped from the soundtrack to the Alice Cooper's Welcome to My Nightmare concert film. I have a feeling this was ripped from that. It sounds like that's where these songs came from. It's not the complete concert. It's only one record's worth of a 90-minute show. I wish they'd have put, they put the Black Widow on here, but I wish they'd have put Devil's Food on here, which had that fantastic dueling guitars, but with Steve Hunter, but they didn't. But I suspect this was ripped from that concert film, but it's a great spin nonetheless. Sounds great. That's '75. Alice Cooper's official first live album came out in 1977. It was called The Alice Cooper Show. And if I were going to rate this album, I would only rate it about a 7. I don't think it was the greatest recording. It wasn't a complete concert. It was selections from his tour at that time. It was just musical selections from the tour to fill a single LP, kind of a greatest hits live kind of thing. It was okay, but I always kind of was like, why didn't they put the whole show out? Why didn't they make a double LP and put the whole concert on? And that was his first live album. That was from 1977. But Back to Black Records a few years ago released a concert from 1978. And I think I would rank this as one of the top live albums I've got in my entire collection. This is Slicker Than a Weasel live 1978 radio broadcast. And because it was a radio broadcast, had fabulous quality. This is from his 1978 tour. Slicker Than a Weasel, and it is the full show, and the sound quality is fantastic, and it's got the full set list on here, and the full concert is on here. A fantastic show, definitely better than Alice Cooper's first live outing. 1978. And this is a very recent Back to Black Rock On Classics, and Back to Black make fabulous pressings. This came out in 2014, but from 1978. Then another Record Store Day drop from a couple of years ago was the Apollo Theatre Glasgow in 1982. This is that tour that Ellis doesn't remember. It's a great spin. It's an unusual time in his life. This is that Special Forces tour that we talked about that was just bizarre with the Commandos. But it's the complete show. It's an interesting spin. I'm really happy to have it in my collection. But definitely a different kind of tour, a different kind of show. But it's nice to have this particular show. I've got all of the major Alice Cooper shows stage shows that he's put together, and this is definitely a worthwhile spin. That's a Record Store Day exclusive. And then this one here from 2005 is a great spin. This is Alice Cooper live in Switzerland in 2005. Also a Back on Black Rock Classics album, brilliantly pressed from his 2005 tour. So a really, really great show from 2005. This one's on a white vinyl. I won't bother pulling it out. But it featured all through the career, and of course this was when he was promoting the Dirty Diamonds tour. So yeah, that Dirty Diamonds was 2005. He was promoting Dirty Diamonds on this. So there were things from Dirty Diamonds on here: Eyes of Alice Cooper, Brutal Planet, Dragontown, plus of course all the classics. So really, really great spin if you can find it. This one's really rare. Then next up, another Record Store Day pressing exclusive. If you can find it, it's a great, great, great spin. It is Alice Cooper. Live from the Astro Turf. I've shown this one before. I'm not going to bother pulling it all apart. Mine's on a kind of a silver vinyl. It was actually released on 12 different colors of vinyl. You never knew what version color you got until you opened it. And the center labels were also different according to the color of vinyl that you got. So they had different center labels and different colors of vinyl, 12 variations, very limited quantity of each of the colors. And this was the 2015 reunion concert by the original Alice Cooper band, a full-length set list. They played a small little club, and they rocked out, did all the classics from their career, and the first time they had performed as a band together since, I believe it was April 1974. So the first time they had performed a full show as a band. And this is a fantastic spin, 10 out of 10, absolutely fantastic show. And then his most recent live album, of course, was the Paranormal Tour from a couple of years ago. And this is, of course, the Paranormal Live in Olympia. And I believe this came out in 2018. Yes, 2018. This is a double live LP. It's a fantastic concert. This just shows that Alice sounds better than ever in this concert. Live at Olympia, Paris. A fantastic spin, which he released the concert film from in the Detroit Stories Deluxe pack. But a fantastic live album as well. And a couple of things to finish off the show. A couple more live albums. These two here. This one here has never been on vinyl. It is live at the Hammersmith in 2009. Alice Cooper Theater of Death. And Alice Cooper Raised the Dead live from Wacken. And it was this tour that inspired him to create the Hollywood Vampires band, as he would do a Hollywood Vampires based set in the album. This is really hard to find. I know there is a vinyl version of this out there somewhere, but I haven't been able to find one. Really expensive, hard to find. This is Alice Cooper Raised the Dead live from Wacken, and this was in 2014. And this is a spectacular show. 2 CDs as well as the DVD of the concert. Really, really, really great live album. One day maybe I'll be able to find it on vinyl as well. But great, great, great production on that. That's it. That's all. Hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Thumbs up always make people feel good. And leave your comments down below. I always reply to all my comments. And if you're not a subscriber to my channel, please subscribe and turn that notification bell on so you don't miss any of my videos. I try to drop a video once a week. And last but not least, if you're not following me on Instagram, follow my Instagram, which is at AGK_Lifetime of Vinyl, where I post my spin of the day almost every day, among other things. That's it. That's all. I'll see you in my next video, or maybe streaming live from Alice Cooper. Until then, as I always say, rock and roll!